doesn't matter if you're a small, tiny startup or mom and pop shop. You will still have to comply with GDPR if the information is personal data.
Welcome to our masterclass about data protection, which is a European law to protect your personal data. In this masterclasses, we're going to go through different examples, checklists, and everything you need to know about GDPR when you're having a business, both to protect your reputation and also to build trust around the people you collaborate with.
And not getting a fine if you're a business running a startup or any other type of business.
Of course, because this law was a really big thing when it was launched in the Europe 2018. And that's why we want to give you all the details about it so you can keep growing your business in a safe way. And today, this episode is also powered by Key Solutions. We're very happy to be able to record in this studio. Let's go. Imagine a press release about fraud being released to the public. And I feel that I am the one being pointed out in this press release without my name being published. How can I do in this situation, and is it personal data? Kat, you're here to explain everything to us that we need to know about it.
Yeah.
Bring it on.
No, nightmare situation.
Yes.
And it happens. And it can be on social media. Many different instances where we feel that our reputation is on the line, perhaps without the name being mentioned. So that's one example when GDPR is so important.
Yes. But in this case, if people can identify me, what kind of data can it be?
Well, let's start with why do we want to know? Because this first episode, we'll talk about what is personal data. We'll keep it short and simple.
Yeah, and why this law also is so important.
Yeah, and why it is important to know if it's personal data or not. Because if it's not, GDPR does not apply, and you're free to do whatever you want, unless it's some other law that you're breaching. So, number one, to get into GDPR, to know if you have any rights as an individual based on GDPR, we need to decide if it's personal data or not. And for you as a business owner, it doesn't matter if you're a small, tiny startup or mom and pop shop. You will still have to comply with GDPR if the information is personal data. So that's why it's always key to understand what is and what isn't. Because personal data, information, is money.
Yeah.
It's gold. It's knowing your customers. It's being able to reach with marketing, behavioral information about your users, any investors you want to talk to, so forth. Your employees, yourself, personal data. What is it really? So we'll start with defining that. And when it comes to GDPR, it applies anytime you're established in the EU or EES region or anywhere in the world if you process personal data from the EU, from a person, a data subject. In this case, you're the data subject. You're the one feeling that this is data about you when you talked about the press release. So then, no matter if you're based in India or the US, you still need to comply with GDPR if you have personal data concerning a person in the EU. So for any of you tech startups or anybody offering your products and services online, globally, you will need to comply with GDPR. So that's why it's such a broad and very important regulation. So it goes beyond just us in the EU. So number one.
Number one.
So personal data, that is information that either directly can identify a natural person. Natural person is either a physical living person or indirectly. So directly or indirectly.
That what it makes it so hard.
Yeah, and it's complex. Because what is what? Your name, Ida Shimmy. That would be a direct identifier. Or your ID number, or your telephone number, your address, so forth. Indirect identifiers, we typically, and the UK authorities do a great job in explaining this because they have a GDPR copy, I would say, because they're not in the EU anymore. They call it a spectrum. You go from I can identify Ida to it could be Ida, it could be anybody. Who is it? I don't know. Somebody, information, right? So here we have your name. That's you.
That's me.
But what if I said, okay, in this press release about fraud, it was a red-headed person. Can I identify you indirectly? Most likely not.
Most likely not.
Too broad, right? It was a woman.
We started to get somewhere, but not.
No. Okay, it's a woman. She's red-headed. She lives in Stockholm. She's a communication expert. And she has a podcast called Business Law Toolbox. Now, can we identify you?
Yes, you can, because you can put the pieces together.
Exactly.
Okay.
So that's an indirect identifier. And even if I said it's a host on Business Law Toolbox, she's a female and she's redheaded, then that, if I'm the controller, I'm the one providing and processing this information. And by processing, we mean any type of usage. Gathering the information, storing it, putting it online, putting it in the press release, anything using that data. But if I give you that information, you're redheaded, you're a host of the Business Law Toolbox podcast, that doesn't suffice to identify you from me, right? But if somebody else has additional knowledge, which they can go online and watch the YouTube channel, and they see that, okay, one is blonde and one is redheaded, by adding those pieces together, I can identify you. Then it will be personal data. So the EU Court of Justice has said that even if that indirect information needs to be added on by other information that you either have already, like your colleagues have or something, or that you can find online, and by putting that together, identifying Ida, then we have personal data.
Okay.
So, you can imagine, and we have some caveats. We'll do a checklist now.
Yes.
Yep.
We're going through the checklist, which can be very good to have.
Indeed. So number one, the information we're talking about, does it concern a natural person? If yes, could be GDPR. If no, is it a legal entity? Then GDPR does not apply, unless, again, it can also be the indirect identifier of a natural person. So number one, what does it concern? Is it a natural person? Number two, is that person alive? Because it only protects data from living individuals. So if you're not born yet, or if you have deceased, you're not protected. So that data can be processed without complying with GDPR. And then that data concerning that individual, can you use it to directly identify Ida? Again, and that can be address, it can be phone number, and it can be physical information, subjective information. So it's very, very broad. Any information is what GDPR says. So if it can directly identify you, it's GDPR, you need to comply. Well, okay, it can't directly identify you, then we'll check, can it indirectly identify you? And then you need to check, can it indirectly identify you together with other available information that the person with reasonable means can add up. So it's you.
Okay, but what can exactly the indirect identifiers be?
Like I said, with the podcast example, or with the press release, we had one of those cases was tried very recently, where the press release talked about a person, a scientist, having committed fraud. And by just reading that, you couldn't know who she was. But she said that all my colleagues at the university will be able to know it's me. And that putting together what the colleagues knew and how they had defined the fraudulent behavior together added up as. And we can also talk about IP addresses. Is that indirect or direct? And can you, together with other location information, putting that together with other information, or a job title combined with which company we're talking about. So saying you're a CEO, but you're the CEO of Business Law Toolbox. Then suddenly, who is that?
Yeah, you could identify me
Yeah,
directly.
exactly.
Yeah.
So it's very, very case by case, very broad. So, and when in doubt, I would say think it's personal data.
Yes.
But that's if indirect. We have more on the checklist. Then we also have to check, is it anonymized? Because if it is, then it's no longer personal data. You can do what you want. And that's really good for you guys running a tech company. You want to know user behavior, or you want to sell that data to somebody else. It can also be health related, but then you have even more additional layers of what you cannot do. But now we're just talking about if you're into GDPR or not. If you anonymize it, it will not be personal data anymore. And then you can use it without complying with GDPR. And it can be pseudonymized, but you need to make sure that nobody holds the key. So if I have information about you, and instead of Ida, I say person number 1, as long as you cannot backtrack and have a key that can lock the number 1 to Ida. Because if there is a key where you can backtrack and go back to number 1 was Ida, then it's still personal data. But if you cut the cord completely, so person number 1 cannot be backtracked to Ida, then it's not personal data anymore.
Okay.
And aggregated data also is not personal data, because then it's on such a broad scale that you cannot identify. Like all of the women, or 95% of the women in Sweden, love to listen to podcasts. That's too broad.
Yeah, too broad.
Yeah.
But I mean, this is a lot of responsibility as a business to know what's personal data or not. But as you said, it's better to be safe than sorry.
Yeah, when in doubt, personal data.
Because what can happen? Because when this law came in Europe in 2018, I mean, a lot of businesses were very stressed of how to handle the information, what's going to happen if we make something illegal. I mean, everybody talked about it.
Yeah.
And they started to make like policies, how to use the information and not, and everything need to be written down and such things.
Yeah. And next episode, we'll look at who is really responsible, who's the controller and who's the processor. And then we'll go through what it means. So this episode, what is personal data? And like you said, it's very many rules how you may use the data, process it, if it does concern a data subject. But we'll help you out. We'll go through and we'll have checklists and we'll have examples so you know more. Because it's not only a hefty fine that comes along with the breach. Perhaps even more important for you as a smaller business will be that it can be hard to raise funds if you want to find an investor or sell your company. And it also can really hurt your reputation with customers if it comes out that you sold their information to Google or you did not comply with the GDPR or something. So it's so much more than just getting a fine. It's about building your goodwill, your reputation, being able to attract other key businesses and so forth.
And also take your responsibility. But I'm thinking also that this law exists and we live in such an open society where, I mean, everybody's name is all over the internet, for example. This is so important, but do people really think about that they have their personal data up and running all the time?
Absolutely.
I mean, we just consent all the time.
True, but I would say yes.
Yeah.
More and more so. And we'll get back also to what you can do if you feel like your data is being used wrongfully, or if there's some information online or somewhere that you do not like. We'll get back to that in another episode, The Right to Be Forgotten.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now we talked about what is considered personal data, and Kat explained it so well to us as usual.
Thank you.
So now you know when you have a businesses, do be more safe than sorry to protect personal data.
And next time we'll talk about who's responsible, and then we'll go into what you need to do when you have the data.
Yes. So stick around until next episode. And we also want to thank Key Solutions for being in their studio today, which we are recording Thank you so much, and until next time.
Bye bye!
Hej då!